We can also make surfaces out of NURBS curves. I'll go back to our toolbox and extrude a curve. Unlike the standard extrude, we can choose the direction. To go back later and make changes to the extrusion, select Sub-Object, Surface, then select the surface. A new extrude rollout appears with the parameters of the extrude. Faces in Max only render one side. The rendered side is called the face normal. The reason for this is to save time when rendering. If your object looks inverted, you can flip the face normals. Or if you want your object to render both sides, you can simply give it a two-sided material. Lathe spins a shape. You can adjust the axis under surface just like we did with extrude. I'll do a simple transform curve, which is just a copy and move. Anytime I use transform, offset, or mirror from the toolbox, the new piece is always green. This means that it is dependent on the original curve or surface. In other words, it defaults to being a reference copy. When I change the original curve, the reference updates also. If I don't want this to be the case, I can choose the curve or surface and select Make Independent, which will break all ties and turn it into just a copy. Using ruled surface, we can create a lofted surface between any two attached curves. I'll use Transform Curve again to copy another curve. Then use Make Independent to break the reference. NURBS don't require that you maintain the same number of points between lofted curves, which is probably its strongest feature. To prove that, I'll delete one of the CVs and create a surface between these two curves. Now we have a nice segmented shape with two surfaces. If we are building something more organic, we may not want these sharp edges, and instead want everything to flow together as one continuous shape. When we want to loft multiple shapes into one surface, we can use U-loft. I'll delete these two surfaces and use U-loft this time. Now we have a more fluid shape. And I can even cap the surface. When I want to blend two shapes together, the Blend tool gives me two options. I can blend from curve to curve or surface to surface. The difference is that curve to curve, which is blue to blue, will give me a segmented look like we got with ruled surface, while surface to surface, which is yellow and blue to yellow and blue, gives me a seamless shape. If the blend didn't come out well, I can try flipping one of the ends or flipping one of the tangents. To modify this shape further, we could select the surface and choose Make Independent, which would break the link between the curves and surface, and turn it into a surface CV. This now shows up in our Sub-Object menu. From here, we can add rows and columns of CVs by using Refine. Or, I'll undo that, and we can choose Convert Surface to specify how many rows and columns, or U's and V's, we want. Which brings us to UV Loft. This is just like a U-loft, except here you don't just specify rows, you specify rows and columns. I'll draw a few curves and attach them all together. They don't need to have the same number of points or even be touching. Just put the ends close to one another. To use UV Loft, first select one direction, then right-click and select the other direction. This is a great way to make a skylight for a house or a windshield for an F-16. We can refine and modify our surface just like we did with U-Loft. And now for 1 and 2 rail sweeps. A 1 rail sweep is very simple. It takes a shape and lofts it along a path. The 2 rail sweep, on the other hand, is very powerful. Here you select 2 paths and a shape. The shape then deforms to meet the 2 paths. You may need to select the surface and flip the normals. You can also go back to the curve and rotate and scale it. Its position and orientation matter here. Then you can modify it just like any other NURB surface by making it independent or adding U's and V's. Earlier I mentioned that NURBs were good for making freeform shapes with holes in them. You can actually project a hole through a NURBS object. Let's make a shape and attach it to our NURBS object. Now choose Vector Projection. Go to the view that you want to project from and select the shape, then the surface. With Trim and Flip Trim, you can decide what you want to keep. By moving the points on the original projection curve, we update the hole. But when we move the points on the surface, the hole stays in the same place. Of course, we can change this. Select the curve of the hole and hit Make COS, or Curve on Surface. Choose how many CVs or points you want and hit OK. This is very similar to the Make Independent button we use with the surface. Now the original projection curve is not linked and the hole is part of the surface and will stretch with it. And finally, we have the ability to animate NURBS curves and surfaces.